Hello there and welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be going through the making of process for the velvet elven inspired top that I made for the Fantasybounding Fashion Flip. The rules were pretty basic. It was that you had to create an outfit that was fantasy inspired that you could wear in, daily life, but you had to do it for under $35 USD. I actually ended up only spending about 20, which makes me pretty happy. I went to the thrift store and picked up two things. I got a kind of purpley, burgundy-ish velvet top, and then I also grabbed a chiffon skirt that I thought I could use as maybe kind of a sleeve item. I didn't really know what I was going to make until I saw the purple top. So I bought both of those, took them home, and started sketching. And this is what I came up with. So it's a sort of Lord of the Rings elf-inspired top with a chiffon sleeve, which turned out to be a very interesting process. You'll see that in a bit. So after that, the first thing that I needed to do was to seam rip part of the velvet top so that I had more of a flat piece of fabric to work with rather than a sewn up tube, because that's basically what it was a tube with tank top sleeves. I drafted the pattern for this myself. Took a couple of tries to get it right, but once I did, it was time to cut out my fabric. So to cut out the velvet fabric, I took my pattern and I weighed it down on the velvet and used a rotary cutter. It was pretty obvious that this stuff was going to be a little too shifty for cutting out with normal scissors. I could just tell it wasn't going to go well. So I cut it out with my rotary cutter. I actually ended up doing the same thing with the chiffon. I did trace the chiffon though. So once I was done cutting out my fabric, it was time to go ahead and sew together most of the front and then most of the back. So I did the center front and then the side fronts. And then I did the same thing on the back pieces and did the side back, but I did not do the center back because it's going to zip. I did baste the center back together though, so that when I was attaching the sleeves, nothing went horribly out of shape. So the next thing I did was to sew the shoulder seams together and then attach the sleeves. So the way I attached my sleeves was by leaving everything flat. I did not have my sleeves seamed together on the sides yet, or on the undersides yet rather. I attached them at the shoulder and eased them in. It wasn't too bad of a process. I've definitely seen and experienced worse. So once that was done, I French seamed the sleeve seams going down the length of the sleeve because it's chiffon and I knew that something bad was going to happen, you know, fraying wise, if I didn't do the finishing properly. So they have French seams on the insides, and then I used a rolled hem foot to hem the cuffs. Time for the side seam. So I used a black cotton for my lining and cut that out, stitch it together in the same way that I did the outer shirt, you know, with the center front, side front, and then the side back seams in the shoulders so that it could just be laid on top of my velvet piece and then stitched together. So after I had those stitched together, I did a little bit of understitching, and then it was time to do the embroidery. I used a silver embroidery thread, which is not the most fun to work with, but it turns out gorgeous every time I use it, so I just can't stop myself. And I embroidered a leaf pattern onto the fabric. I attached my fabric to my embroidery hoop using some of the, it's like a stick-on stabilizer, so you hoop the stabilizer and then you stick the back of the fabric to it instead of just hooping the fabric itself, because you shouldn't hoop velvet because you'll end up with hoop burn marks on it, so there'll be just like weird circular arcs showing up in the fabric and it's kind of permanent, so I didn't want to deal with that. At this point, I was at kind of a rush for time, and I had to have the collaboration for our cozy project done, so I kind of half-assed finishing my shirt. I do regret doing it this way, but I just ran out of time, and I had to do what I had to do. Okay, so I did finish this shirt in time for the cozy event. However, it is not exactly perfect. I mean, perfection is something a little crazy to go after, but there's a couple of key things that I really want to fix with it. Thing one, the neckline does kind of have a tendency for the lining to roll and show, so that's something I need to fix. I think that my solution there is going to be slightly better understitching. I just need to take some of that out and redo it. Also, this point here in the center isn't exactly as pointy as I wanted it to be, which I think is just going to be a matter of me restitching slightly, just so it goes just a tiny bit further down, right here in the center, and then taking out this row stitching right here, so it will have a slightly more pointy point. Not too much more, just a little bit. The other thing, and the thing that I need to fix the most, is the fact that when the shirt is worn, the top half is perfectly fine, but especially in the front, it seems that the velvet is sagging a little bit, like it almost looks saggy, and I'll show a picture. But I'm going to undo all of the hemming And what I'm going to do is I'm going to insert these pieces of interfacing. There's also pattern pieces in here, but these pieces of black sew-in interfacing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to insert those, going to attach them to the velvet by hand on the actual seam allowance of the velvet, so it's not actually going to be like attached to this part. And then after that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to, on the lining side, I'm going to insert some boning. So we're going to end up with boning on the center front, on the sides, and then next to the zipper on the back, and that's it. And that should make it fit exactly how I want it to. So I cut out some sew-in black interfacing that did not have the seam allowance from the pattern on it, and I stitched it to the seam allowance of the velvet so that it would give the velvet a little bit of structure to try to keep it from sagging. The velvet that I chose was way drapier than I should have used for a project like this, but I wanted to make it work. I wanted to use this fabric. It was just too pretty not to. So once I was done with that, I made a couple of other adjustments, like I was talking about before with the neckline and stuff, and then I went ahead and cut some boning. I put one piece in the center front, one piece on each of the sides, and then one piece on each side of the zipper. I attached the boning to the lining on top of where the seams were at those points, and then after I had attached it, I wrapped the seam allowance from the lining around it so that it wouldn't be exposed, so that it wouldn't touch the velvet at all. Once I was done with that, it was time to hem the top again. And now that it was hemmed, it was time to do my final reveal. Thank you for watching, and stick around for some upcoming spooky sewing and other fun fall projects.